Assalamu alaikum students. Um, so today we meet to start with our third play in our course of classical and Renaissance drama. So far we have done two dramas, one from Greek tragedy and the other is uh, Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, a Renaissance play with medieval elements. That is something that we are through. Today we are going to start with William Shakespeare's, and the two plays that are going to be done for covered up for this end term are King Lear and Twelfth Night. So starting off with King Lear, but before that, I would like to, obviously, we would like to know the times of the writer, which we already know quite in some detail with respect to Christopher Marlowe. So we have to see what makes Shakespeare. And though as students of literature now you can know the birth of Christopher Marlowe and his blank verse and why it was called Mighty Line and all the technical things that you have learned in that drama of Dr. Faustus. However, on the other hand, we see that nobody outside the literature circles know much about Christopher Marlowe, whereas this is not the case in in the case of Shakespeare. So, what makes Shakespeare, and why is it known so far that in English drama scene is known by his name? And if you remember in the previous class, in the previous lectures, we talked about the four traditions. One was the scattered individuals starting from the middle part of the 16th century, which was 1550s, around 1550s. Then there was this second tradition of university wits. The third tradition was Shakespeare, and the fourth tradition was Ben Jonson. So now we are going to study this third tradition of English drama and why the name only of Shakespeare can become, they can attain the quality of or the importance of being a tradition itself. So there are things which we would learn about Shakespeare, which makes him what he is. So this unparalleled human writer, that is like no, even if we are not students of literature, we know him. So William Shakespeare was born at Stratford upon Avon. That was a small town on the River Avon in 1564, and if you remember correctly, then 1564 is the year when Christopher Marlowe is also born. But unfortunately, we know that Christopher Marlowe, he died at a very young age. Rather, he was stabbed, and his wound got worse, and he died of that wound when he was only 29 years of age. So, in 1592, he had given his masterpieces, Christopher Marlowe, as a university wit, and he, with all those with that language, and we have talked about its merits. But who is Shakespeare? Is he also from a university? We don't know. And that is why this writer, his early life is all shrouded in mystery. We only know that he came from Stratford upon Avon and that small town. But otherwise, it's his earlier, there's very less known about his life. Students, I would be referring to these three books today, from which I will be giving you this lecture. And these books are this one, William Shakespeare's King Lear, and there is this introduction part. About William Shakespeare, which is quite good, but I would add into it also there are certain points that I'd like to discuss. And then I would also be referring to David Deish's book, which is going to be in my coming lectures, certainly, and this book of The Year of Lear by James Shapiro, very recent book by Columbia University's professor James Shapiro. It was published in 2018. And I would be sharing this book with you people also. Luckily, I have got it in my soft copy also. But this is the book, and this drama, King Lear and Twelfth Night of the same, Penguin Classics is the book that we would be referring to. We would be reading, and I would advise all of you to get hold of this if you have not already. And I'm sure that most of you have them with you. So, he was the third child of John Shakespeare and Mary Arden, and as luck would have it, Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway, daughter of a farmer of Shottery near Stafford, and the age gap was like he was 18 and she was 26, and their firstborn child Susanna was born in 1583. So that's some parts from his earlier life. However, we have to see that this person who's coming from a very small town, and he is appearing in on the stage of London or London scene in 1595, around this time period, as an extra actor, and we don't know about his university education. Nothing is known about that whether he had any university education, and that is why he was looked down upon by some of the university wits, especially Robert Greene. I hope you remember the previous lecture about university wits. One university wits, of course, we have studied. The other university wit, Thomas Kyd, his roommate, Christopher Marlowe's roommate, he had written the Spanish tragedy in 1588. So these university graduates, they had taken the London drama scene by storm, and they were producing dramas which were known afar, and they were really popular at that time. Now we are talking about what kind of in England are we talking about? What kind of times are we talking about? So these are some questions, and this is just a brainstorming exercise that I'm doing so that we understand the times of Shakespeare, and then his merits and his universality, and his points of superiority or his points of popularity. We would be discussing all that in this lecture. So coming back to the times themselves now. First of all, we need to understand that we are talking about, roughly speaking, there are 3 time periods. Students, I would like you to just have your pens and notebooks ready. Keep them with you, because you should be taking a lot of notes while I'm speaking. And that is why, let's come back to this. So we are here that we... roughly speaking, there is a period of classical antiquity, and from that classical antiquity, that is Greek literature, you have studied Oedipus Rex. Then in the history of England, there is a time period which is known as the Dark Ages. After the classical antiquity, there's a time period of Dark Ages, and then there is the recovery period in the history of Europe, especially recovery period from 1300 to 1400. That is the roughly time period. I'm just giving you an understanding and placement. I'm going to situate our Shakespeare, our writer, in these times. That what was the background and all. So then we have the recovery period, which is from 1300 to 1400 AD, and then the Renaissance period. And you have already studied one drama of that period by Christopher Marlowe. although his drama, especially Dr. Faustus, had many elements of Renaissance as well as medieval, and that is something besides this. It's like we are not bringing that discussion into this literature. However, that is the Renaissance time. Well, now what is that Renaissance time? Renaissance is means again, and Renaissance means birth. So Renaissance is the time period when which roughly starts from 1500 to 1660. uh, and the political aspect, or the political background of this period, I've already talked to you about in the previous lectures, about Henry VIII, who was Henry VIII, who was Queen Mary, and who was Queen Elizabeth. So we are talking about we have entered in the late 16 century, that is 1590s onwards, into the time period which is Renaissance period. Now this Renaissance period, see, when we are living in it, in some times we don't know what period is that, we can't define it. Like it is always in the hindsight, in the posterior generations, they term this that particular period. So this Renaissance period, or this recovery periods, these are the divisions which the later critics have been making. So Renaissance was actually a term which was which was coined by Jules Michelet. I'd like you to just write this name down: Jules Michelet, Michelet, and he coined this term of Renaissance. The time period that roughly speaking, that I've talked about is from 1500 to 1660, but he is coining this term in 1885. So many centuries down the line, he's coining this term of Renaissance, in order for us to understand that whatever writings were emerging, as students of literature, of course, we are concerned with that whatever writings were emerging, they were categorized as Renaissance period. So I hope that part we have understood what exactly. So it was basically, what was Renaissance? It was an intellectual, cultural, and artistic movement. We will come across further movements in literary history around the world also. Not in our course, we are just going to focus on English history. So Renaissance was an intellectual, cultural, and artistic movement which started off in Europe first in around 1500, and it went till 1660. So now we are here in the late 1590s, that is late 16th century. Now this writer, who's later known to be Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, he's appearing on the London scene in 1595, as I told you, as an extra actor, and but he is unparalleled he was the most widely read and most widely quoted and most widely performed, reviewed, and most widely performed writer of all times. So what are his points of superiority that his contemporary, if you remember the fourth tradition of in English drama, which was Ben Jonson, he was his contemporary. Ben Jonson was Shakespeare's contemporary, but he was his junior. He was born in 1574. So when Shakespeare dies in around 1616, Ben Jonson, although he is his dramatic, his rival in drama scene, yet he writes this elegy, which is which is a very popular elegy, and you can just Google it out, and it says. I'm just going to read out 1 or 2, 3 lines about that. He says. The elegy goes like this: Triumph, my Britain, thou hast one to show, to whom all scenes of Europe homage owe. He was not of an age, but for all time. So this is how it goes. And this last line, that he was not of an age, but for all time, has become actually an adage for we associate with Shakespeare. So Shakespeare, though he was not from a university, he was not a university graduate, and he was looked down upon by university wits, especially Robert Greene, who used these words for Shakespeare, that he is an upstart crow beautified with our feathers. So that is something. He's been called an upstart crow beautified with our feathers, and yet he becomes so popular. So what is the first and foremost quality that we now can see Shakespeare had was a very sharp and acute sense of observation. And although he appeared in London as an extra actor, but he was actually observing the actors, he was observing the productions, he was observing everything on the London scene. And that is why in 1593, although theatres were closed due to plague, outbreak of the plague at that time, which recurred in the time of the writing of King Lear, also our drama that we are going to focus um, in this series of lectures. So this and Twelfth Night. So. But and yet we see that in around 1594, when Christopher Marlowe had left the stage of the life. He was stabbed to death, as we know, that at a very young age of 29. I don't know whether I mentioned this, that he is Christopher Marlowe and Shakespeare. Their date of birth is their year of birth is same. That is 1564. Christopher Marlowe was born in 1564. Shakespeare was also born in 1564. However, Shakespeare outlived him, and he was he died in 1616, whereas Christopher Marlowe, we all know that he died in 1592 and he was stabbed to death. So in 1594, when we don't find Christopher Marlowe on the drama scene, who had given that mighty line of Christopher Marlowe, who had given that blank verse to drama, he's no more there. Thomas Kidd is no more there. So Shakespeare at this point in time is left with is kind of without any rival for some time, and that is why he becomes a sharer in Lord Chamberlain's, and he plays his he goes up to this ladder of success in a very short time. So Lord Chamberlain's company, he becomes a shareholder of that company, and he tries his hands earlier on historical drama, and the themes of this historical drama he mostly takes from the 100 Years of War, which was there in England and between House of Plantagenet and French House of Valois from 1337 to 1453, and then there was this then there was a long series of civil wars between two house of Plantagenets. One was House of Lancaster, and the other was the House of York. And interestingly, they had their symbols as roses. So House of Lancaster was symbolized as red rose, and House of York was symbolized as white rose. And towards the end of this whole tussle, it was the Tudor dynasty which finally came to the throne with Henry V and then Elizabeth, Queen Mary, and then Elizabeth. And you know that part of the story which we have discussed earlier. So these were the wars from where he took his inspiration. Shakespeare tried his hands, like I said, on historical drama, and he wrote many historical dramas starting from Henry VI. Three parts of he wrote that Henry VI in three parts, Richard III, Titus Andronicus, the two gentlemen of Verona, Love Labour's Lost, Comedy of Errors. These are his earlier plays, and you can Google out. He has got there's a long list of Shakespeare plays, and they're mostly 35 in number. Although Shakespeare, I would also like to tell you that Shakespeare wanted, himself to be called more of a poet than a dramatist, and he in so many words, he said he was of the view that this drama, the medium of drama, he is used to earn money, and that is something that he got because became the owner. Although he was a shareholder in Lord Chamberlain's company, but then later on he was the owner of the Golden Globe theaters. We'll come to that also. And so this introduction, I would like you to just read this introduction and keep on writing your questions down if you are unable to understand any part. There's another very important thing that I would like to tell you about this part, his works at his time. Now, Lord Chamberlain's company was actually, he's known as the Elizabethan dramatist. Okay? But Elizabethan dramatist, as James Shapiro writes, that, we all do this mistake. And this is the book of James Shapiro that I mentioned, The Year of Lear. This is the book. This recently came out I don't know whether it is here in the market, but I would be sharing the third soft copy. So in this book, James Shapiro has also talked about this aspect that we all have the tendency of calling Shakespeare as Elizabethan dramatist because he was there in Queen Elizabeth's time. But Queen Elizabeth dies in 1603, and Shakespeare, till that time, he has written many dramas of course repute, like Hamlet, like Twelfth Night, the second play that you would be reading. But at the same time, he's writing his best tragedies in the later part, which is Queen Elizabeth dies in 1603, and we find that King Lear is written in 1606, and Macbeth is also written in 1606. Such great tragedies is written in 1606. Then there are his later plays, which he was which he kind of introduced a new genre like tragic comedy. For example, there are tragic elements, but it ends in a comical manner. That is The Winter's Tale and his later plays. You can read the details over here. Acha. Another important aspect about his plays is that he was writing with a lot of speed, and if you read Hamlet in the ones if you have read it with me or with anybody else, or you've read it on your own, you must have seen that Hamlet is his first tragedy, kind of first tragedy, which was like and 20th century critic. Get it? Like Hamlet and his problems. He has written this essay on Hamlet and his problems, and he is considered the play as an artistic failure. Not the Hamlet, the character, but the play as an artistic failure. I'm forgetting the name of the critic. It's like Tradition and Individual Talent is his first essay, and then which is in your course in the 7th semester and all. Anyway, it will come, and I'll be telling you that also. So his plays, they are later compiled in either folios or quartos. Now around 1623, that were compiled posthumously. So quarto is actually a book folded in four, like a fork. The page was folded in four ways in the inside the book, and that was known as quarto. Whereas folio was, yeah, like for instance, if this is your book, this is folio, and if you just fold this paper in four parts, four times, that would be quarto. So you should be knowing these two terms, folio and quarto, when you come across Shakespeare's work, especially. So uh, now, a word about his the playhouses, the public playhouses in Shakespeare's time. They were very intimate affair, and we have discussed that with respect to Christopher Marlowe also. That first, how this drama scene evolved. Remember those lectures? Remember how they evolved from Corpus Christi, from miracle plays, from mystery plays, morality plays, Corpus Christi Festival, and then it came to how it moved from the churchyard to the marketplace and also, and therefore now this particular aspect and the Renaissance element is more pronounced in you will see in Shakespeare as compared to Christopher Marlowe. So even then, in Shakespeare's time, the playhouses, they were very small and intimate affair. And however, with the passage of time, this Elizabethan theatre, oh yes, I was talking about this aspect, that Elizabethan, why do we call him an Elizabethan playwright? We have this uncanny tendency, of which James Shapiro also writes this thing, that we have the uncanny tendency of calling him an Elizabethan writer. However, most of his writings were into King James time, and he was, and during his time, he was known as, his company was known as Kingsmen. He was patronized, he was given patronage by King James himself. So the first part, of his life, of his dramas were under Elizabethan times, and then it is mostly most of his tragedies and are in later times, King James times. Okay. I think because this particular aspect is about King Lear's tragedy of King Lear, the background of tragedy of King Lear is something that we're going to cover in the next lecture. However, I'm just going to talk about one or two aspects because we are left with 2 minutes, and I'm going to all right, let's see how much we can cover. Now, I jotted down some points of his points of popularity and his causes of his popularity and points of superiority of Shakespeare. Now, and this is something that you would find in all the most of his dramas. In King Lear, we'll see where we'll find these. So the first point of popularity is, cause of his popularity is universality of themes and subjects. So he uses a universality of his themes are universal in nature, and the subject matter that he takes is also of universal nature. Another big quality of Shakespeare's writing is that it is meant simultaneously for the layman as well as the scholar. Now, the stalls, as I told you, that theatre was a very intimate affair, so that the people who could not pay very much, they used to be very closer to the stage, and they could they were, the low, it's coming from the lower stratus of the society. So Shakespeare's writings, as you will see, as we would start with King Lear, you will see that he is this his works are meant simultaneously for a layman as well as a scholar who's reading Shakespeare's times. He would be likewise interested. Then I think I'll call it today, and we'll continue with this. Students, we will have series of lectures because they're going to be of half an hour only, so that they can be uploaded easily. So there would be a number of lectures, and we would be covering them in that in these coming up lectures. So that's all for now. Thank you so much.